That's not my name. Call me ass. One more time.
You want to know how California got its name? It's not named after some explorer or king. Nope. Someone made the name up.
Wait, you're guilt tripping me, aren't you?
I'm cold.
I can tell. You know how I can tell? Because we're connected.
You come, ask Mary. I had a feeling. I said he heard me, and he's ready for a change. This is great. After you do this, you come in a little hot.
Yeah. I'm meeting the house.
This is a great place for us to start. I know you don't drive.
Damn it.
Whoa.
Boom.
And we're back. Surprise.
I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemaniacs.
We still have it. We have been off for about a month.
More than that. I don't
Mentally
know.
longer. Because all of the holidays seem to be falling on Mondays, which is when we tape. And then we had technical difficulties. But now we're back with how many films to choose from?
To their chagrin. We got, 18 now.
So
we pared them down.
Place your bets on how many we'll get through.
Yes.
Shall I?
If you want to.
Oh my, it's been so long. First up, we have a film, now award-winning, maybe more awards by the time you watch this film, directed by Guillermo del Toro, who brought you such things as The Devil's Backbone and Mimic and a lot of other things. And it tells the tale of a mute woman working in a government facility under top-secret conditions who finds love with a Gilman, Morris Gilman, and she learns that love and life form the shape of water.
So we don't have the nice titles and stuff because we started with 24 clips that I had to do, and it takes me about half an hour for each one. So sorry. Next week we'll be back to normal, but Shape of Water. What'd you think?
I was going to say, so there's your minute of talking about this movie.
Exactly.
I really like this a lot. I'm not a huge fan of Guillermo del Toro. I always appreciate his movies more than I really love them. I've more or less liked them all, but they never 100% work for me. This one probably was his most successful for me and my taste.
I'll agree.
Gorgeous to look at, gorgeously shot, amazing
Always
production
is,
design that you want to step into this world of the early 60s with all the chrome and the automats and things like that. It's more or less another Creature from the Black Lagoon movie. I thought of this.
But it's the love story.
It's the love story.
It, yeah.
It's almost like Creature from the Black Lagoon / fiction, or like erotic fanfic. Because this movie's a little randy.
It was.
This movie's randier than I expected it would be. Because I thought this was going to be like a fairy tale. It's an adult fairy tale. There's a little fiddling going on here and there.
Right.
Michael
full
Shannon,
frontal nudity.
Full frontal nudity.
For both of them, actually.
Okay, and later on we're going to talk about Paddington too. So if you ever wanted, I don't want to be rude.
Want to talk about full frontal nudity? Just wait.
If you ever wanted to see the mom in Paddington 2 naked, well, go to see Shape of Water or Michael Shannon's butt. But anyway, I really like this a lot. It's a good monster movie. It's a good love story. It's a little bit of an ode to Hollywood. I quite enjoyed it, but I would say leave the kids at home.
I thought this was a nice, just kind of throwback to, it's set in decades past, and it felt like those kinds of films because you have a very clear-cut bad guy and some very clear-cut good guys, and the scientists who are torn. There's the Soviet intrigue all going on. So everything you said, I just fell in love, obviously, with the visual scheme. If this doesn't, I'm sure it's got to be nominated for production design and art direction and cinematography. But it was just beautiful to look at. Certainly kind of odd, which I expected from Del Toro. But overall, I thought Shape of Water was really fun and fine film.
And I didn't realize this was next, but speaking of Sally Hawkins, who's the mom in this
Yes,
film.
exactly. The Brown family is back. We can take a trip across the pond. Maybe you swim, like our fish man. But however you get over there, the Brown family is back with our favorite bear causing hijinks and everything in Paddington 2.
Mr. Gruber. So I was not looking forward to the original Paddington movie.
I was not crazy about the original
Paddington. My knowledge
Paddington.
of Paddington was that it was a bear and he spoke in soft tones
Right.
and he ate marmalade. And I'm like, ugh. But I found the first Paddington movie to be wonderfully visual and very funny. And like being a big fan of British TV, like I recognized everybody in the movie.
Okay.
So very much looking forward to this one. This I think is not as good as the first, but I still liked it a lot. I laughed more during this out loud than I did in the last several alleged comedies that I've been to see in the theater. Again, the visual style is there, a great cast, very quirky and funny, some surprisingly dark humor at times.
Yep.
And I must say, if you go to see this in the theater, which you should, stay into the credits. It's not after the credits, but the credits roll a little bit, and there's an additional scene, and it is very clear that no time or expense was spared on that screen, on that scene. It's not a quick little dialogue throwaway. So that is my Paddington 2 high.
Okay, I was not crazy about the first one. I thought it was a perfectly acceptable family film. I was not looking forward to going to see this one, and I liked this more than the first one. I thought certainly, we'll say the effects, that Paddington is just like, I believe I can walk out and just meet him, because the effects in that were just terrific. I also laughed a lot more at this one than the first one. I found the first one to be the kind of lowbrow potty humor that we often discuss about kids' films, and I thought this one didn't necessarily stoop to that. So perfectly good for families. A colleague of mine took her young son to it and just had a great time. So yeah, Paddington 2 is exactly what you would expect from it, and I thought it was quite good.
And you know, while you brought up journalism and First Amendment defense in that review,
exactly,
it plays right into the next film we're talking about. New film by Steven Spielberg, which I didn't know until the end credits rolled, starring Meryl Streep and Tom Hanks as people working at the Washington newspaper, where the Pentagon Papers may or may not be published at the risk of their paper being shut down by the government. That paper was, and still is, the Post.
So ultimately, I can't complain, although I'm going to, when you have such unbelievable talent. I mean, truly the greatest talent in Hollywood with Spielberg. He's not going to make a boring, bad film. Streep is wonderful. Hanks is always wonderful. But I was kind of wondering why necessarily this had been made. You have to compare it to All the President's Men. In fact, it bleeds into that very nicely toward the very, very end. In taking this away, my ultimate comment was, this, for me, if I'm going to give this kudos, which ultimately I think it deserves, was a look into the woman who actually ran, Streep's character, who actually ended up in a time where women were certainly not valued, and, oh, you're the silly woman, the board's going to take over whatever you want and just forget about it. She had a couple of moments that I thought were really striking and reminded me why she's Meryl Streep, why everybody, bows to her, because I thought she was really wonderful. Hanks is perfectly good. It's a perfectly acceptable film, but I just felt like I'd seen it many times before.
I think it's hard to unsee All the President's Men. Like any movie about newspapers fighting for what's right, you look at it through a mesh of screen. You're looking at through the screen door that is All the President's Men you're looking through. To me, it wasn't as good as that, and whether that's this movie's fault or not, I don't know. For me, the value of this film was I didn't know what the deal with the Pentagon Papers was. I had always heard of it, but I didn't know what it was. So this film filled that gap in my knowledge. It did bring back, you're right, it did fill in, because I lived through this, and I wasn't aware really what authority the White House was trying to impose on the press. And that was a pretty frightening moment when this film brought that out. Elements of this film seem really relevant right now. Don't they, though? And I also thought it was very interesting seeing the process of how newspapers, at least at the time, were made. Yeah. You see the people cutting the letters and cutting the logos. It made me sad about that. That whole thing was so cool. And the printing presses and all that. Right. Also interesting, Bob Odenkirk and David Cross are both in this film. Big fan of Mr. Show from way back when. And to see those guys as these balding, middle-aged, slubby guys standing next to each other in one scene, I'm like, hey, it's Bob and David. They're not being silly. Ultimately, I didn't find it very exceptional for me. Right. I was just kind of like, okay, this is interesting, but I'm not really thrilled by it. Right. That having said that, the theater was filled with people when I went to see this at a Sunday matinee. Grown-ups, nice to have a movie for grown-ups. And talking with Elias, our former intern here, who's like 17 or 18 right now, he thought it was great, and he had no knowledge of All the President's Men or the Pentagon Papers or anything. Wow. So well, we have to educate him about All the President's Men. The youth have embraced the Post. Terrific. Things you might not embrace, though. No. Could be dangerous times ahead, particularly if you're Liam Neeson. All you're trying to do is get through your day, right? You're a businessman trying to get to work. Unfortunately, you find some nefarious activity because you are the commuter. Yeah. Have you seen this movie with him on a plane? So, it's got snakes in it? Yeah, but no, it wasn't snakes on a plane. Oh. But yeah, this is it the monthly iteration? I don't know. He doesn't come out with stuff this fast. Perfectly good film, especially if you like Neeson. When Taken first came out, I was like, really? Liam Neeson as an action hero? There's a lot of people, younger people, and just people without a lot of memory power, who just think of him as an action guy. They have no concept that he started off in like arty films. Right. Yeah. And he's done lots of, what was it, Walk Through the Gravestones, Graveyard or something like that? Walk Among the Tombstones. Walk Among the Tombstones, lots of really good stuff. So I like when he does a Jason thing. This is his Taken
for this month.
Taking our
Perfectly
train.
acceptable. It's basically, and I don't remember the name of the one where you and I were talking about it, where he's on the plane and somebody takes over the plane and he's got X number of hours.
When I saw the trailer for this, to me it looked very similar to that.
Right,
movie.
and that's what I was expecting going in, and that's what it is. But it's a perfectly good time. Do you want to rush out to the theaters? I think this is going to be a lot of fun on video when you're just kind of watching it at home and having a good time with it. So ultimately, I thought The Commuter was a perfectly good escapist kind of film.
Not like Despicable or anything.
No.
Speaking of despicable and other synonyms for evil,
Yes.
we have another film in a franchise from the producers of Sinister or Paranormal Conjuring or something like that. Lin Shaye stars as everybody's favorite psychic who goes beyond into, what do they call it, the other or something like that. In the fourth film in the series, we have, I'm just going to cut right to it, we don't have much time, Insidious for
People who need help.
Ouch.
everything I hate about modern horror movies. It was well made for the most part.
Yeah,
It
production
crafted
value and everything.
good
Good
sense of
performances.
atmosphere and all
Yeah.
that. But to me, we don't have time, so I won't get into the whole tirade. But jump scares aren't legit.
Right.
If I tickle you and you laugh, it doesn't mean you thought it was funny.
And this genre, not even the genre, but this, the Insidious movies didn't used to do that. They didn't used to drop
and
to
this
that
is
level.
pretty much all it has going. I mean, it builds up some atmosphere, and then there's a loud noise or something pops up and you
Right.
scream. Cool to see a woman in her, I'm going to be polite, 50s, as the star of a franchise. And I'm sitting there in the theater, and I'm like, I'm surrounded by like 14-year-olds in this theater, and they're all riveted to this movie. At the moment that I thought that, I'm like, there's two old people on the screen, and they are with
Right,
it. So
yeah.
it doesn't all have to be teenagers in films. Nice to see Bruce Davidson, as always, and Lin Shaye's cool. But ultimately, I was just like, I don't really care about this because it's all of that, of the look and the CGI faces where a jaw opens too wide. And I'm like, that just looks, I want to laugh. It's not scary.
Right.
So it really wasn't anything that pleased me. So I won't be watching it again.
Well, you and I are horror fans. I really enjoyed the early ones. Obviously, regular viewers know that I'm a paranormal investigator as well with TAPS and New England Paranormal and all that. So these things kind of lend themselves to my interest. They stay pretty true to what we do. But this one in particular, first of all, I don't think I'm giving anything away. Our lead character died in the second movie, and they keep finding interesting enough ways to bring her back. I like her a lot. I think you're being generous at 50. I think she's 60s or something.
Well, like I said, I was being polite.
But she's a wonderful actress. She's riveting. Good performances. They force these two kind of bumbling Abbott and Costello investigator teams on us.
They're really annoying. They're not funny.
They're not funny, but they, as you said off air, so I'm going to take credit for it. The movie makes a point that they're not funny, but it's still not funny. It's not funny that they're not funny.
Right.
And so I'm getting real tired of them. Ultimately, this was my least favorite of the Insidious, although if you're just a huge diehard for it, wait until video or somehow, or if you get Movie Pass, it's not a waste of time, I don't think.
If we get a nickel every time we mention Movie Pass because we legitimately love it,
Right.
we'd have like 15 cents by now.
Well, but if you get a nickel and if you keep building all those nickels up, you might be able to spend them if your son had been kidnapped, as happened to the Getty family. The heiress and mother of all of our...
We're going to skip that one.
Oh, we were? Well, we're going to skip it. And I'm going to go on to... Oh, you're right. I'm going to go on to something that has a local connection, maybe if you happen to be here in Keene. You remember when Robin Williams was around and he was playing a board game and all sorts of craziness, I'm not going to say the H word, broke loose? Well, we're back. The board washes its way up and some kids find it, and it morphs itself into an adventure game, an electronic adventure game, where you can play Jumanji and say, welcome to the jungle.
Hot damn.
Yes, effects heavy.
Very effects
I didn't
heavy.
think they were great, but they were acceptable.
So, people who are local to this embrace Jumanji because it's the major motion picture, dare I say classic, that was made in this town.
Right.
So I think some of us, and I don't wave a flag for Jumanji. It's cool that we live in a
Right.
town where they shot that. And I saw some of it being shot. There's a little bit of a beef that they're remaking Jumanji and blah, blah, blah. Well, this actually is not a remake, thank
Right.
God. And that's my thing. It's like you could make, and I don't know why, maybe it wasn't as big a hit as we thought it was when it came out, but it's such a brilliant, simple concept that you could make 100 of these things.
Sure.
Different people, different scenario, go crazy. So that's what they did here. It's now a video game, which I thought was stupid originally,
Right.
but okay, fine, once you accept that you...
It's magic.
That's
so
the movie they made, so I'm going to either accept it or not. So that you have these group of high school kids in detention who get sucked into the game, and they morph into these iconic kind of video game characters or archetypes. And it does a lot with the whole idea of how video games work, like cutscenes and all this other stuff, which was kind of funny. Some of the cliche characters you would find in an old cheap video game are presented well. I really liked the fact, we'll disagree on this, but we discovered off air. I really like the fact that, for me, I never lost sight of who the real characters were in the movie. Like, it's The Rock, but he's really a nerd. And he did a really good job. Dwayne Johnson did a really good job conveying the fact that despite being beefy and occasionally having bravery, he's a nerd and he doesn't want to do this stuff.
Right.
And all through that. So I thought it was very funny. The action was pretty well done for a change. I thought Karen Gillan, whatever, from Amy Pond, from Doctor Who, was really good as this awkward girl who's in a hot girl body, and this moment where she's being trained to be hot by the Jack Black character who is the real hot girl in life. And when she has to approach these henchmen and be all seductive was just very funny because she was obviously not very good at it. The one big demerit I will give the film is they keep talking about that her character has dance fighting as one of her abilities.
Right.
And when that moment comes, it should have been her dancing to the music and happening to beat these guys up, but it was just she was beating guys up to the tune of some music, which was just kind of silly.
Right.
There is a reference to Robin Williams in this film, which I didn't really think was necessary.
Right.
But that distracted me a little bit. But otherwise, I thought this was good. I thought they could probably make 10 more of these if they choose to. It's certainly doing well enough to do that. So I'm really curious to see if the sequel is going to be the same cast with, now it's a grandmother who's in the Rock's body, or if it's going to be a totally fresh group of people and maybe a different style of game every time. I don't know.
I did not like it nearly as much as you did. I really liked the actors in it. I didn't think they did nearly enough with what I thought was going to be the clever premise of we're in a video game and so we can play around with some of that. So I didn't think they did nearly enough with that. There's a logic issue. If you remember, Robin Williams gets sucked into the game. When he comes back out in the original, he's aged. Well, we have a kid who got sucked into the game, and he's still the same age, at least in the game. I think when we come back, he's aged. But there's a time issue. So if you want to put logic to it, but it's Jumanji. What do you want? Ultimately, I was disappointed with it, and I didn't think it held up the way it really could have or should have.
So you're saying there wasn't enough pizzazz and panache in this film?
I wanted it to really be big and blustery. And
you wanted it, frankly, to be, I mean, it's no small ask, but you wanted it to be the greatest show on earth.
Absolutely.
Well, see, what you should have done then is gone to see this other film with Hugh Jackman in it, where he plays P.T. Barnum. And it's a musical, somewhat fanciful tale of Barnum's rise from nobody to big somebody and becoming the greatest showman. Hi.
Don't know where that came from, but where did this come from?
It was really good.
Holy cow! Yeah.
I really liked this a lot. I mean, I'd seen that trailer and I thought, well, this could be whatever.
Right. But it looked so weird, kind of.
Love the Ackman. I didn't know if it was going to be what I think of as too modern a musical style set in the past.
Okay.
And it pretty much is. Most of the music in the film is it's not like hippity hop or anything, but it's pretty contemporary sounding, but not so much so that it distracted me. It looks great.
Yeah.
Everybody in it is great. The staging of the production numbers is fantastic. The music is really good. There's a dance sequence between Hugh Jackman and Zac Efron in a bar that is as good as classic Hollywood musicals. Like I'm watching that and I'm giggling at how well the choreography between those two guys and the bartender, every little motion leads to each other. And I'm like, this is like a Chan movie. And I'm like, no, this is like a Fred Astaire movie because the Chan movies were based on Fred Astaire and Gene Kelly stuff. So yeah, I loved it. I had a great time. It is relatively accurate from what I've read, but it's inoffensive and it is a really good old-style Hollywood musical.
That's kind of what surprised me was, as you say, how inoffensive and in many respects almost a family movie this can be.
I was like, what is this rated? I don't think there's even profanity in the movie.
Because you get him and you see Barnum organizing all of these outcasts, so there's social commentary going on underneath. I'd forgotten what a wonderful voice and what a truly talented performer Jackman is. I should have remembered from Les Mis. But yeah, everything you said twice, I'm going to be buying this the moment it comes out because it is so much fun and the numbers are great. They're not memorable. I was listening to it on the
I couldn't tell you what any of the music was now.
Right, exactly. But it's just loads and loads of fun to watch. And I thought The Greatest Showman was probably one of my favorite movies of last year.
I can't remember. Do they sing a cappella?
I don't know, but there are lots of good songs if you're interested. Bella Bella, they're all separated. They're all split apart. And Anna Kendrick and all of her friends have to reunite after their world championship win to defend honor and value in a USO tour because they're back for Pitch Perfect 3. So I know you're not crazy about these movies. I love them. I love the singing that's going on and all of the performance and everything. In many respects, similar to the same reasons I liked Greatest Showman quite so much. It's amazing to hear Anna Kendrick sing because, you know, she started out as, and I forget what her first early films were. But then all of a sudden she comes out in this and says, holy cow, she's got a great voice. This is my least favorite of all of them because of all of the convolutions of how you get them back. But it's great music if you like the singing and everything, and if you're a fan of them. Pitch Perfect 3 was perfectly fine.
I didn't see it. So that's all we have to talk. We have a short time. That's all we have to talk about that's currently in theaters that we're going to talk about today. We thank our friends at the Latches Theater in Brattleboro, Vermont for sponsoring this fine program. And we thank our friends at Keen Cinemas for taking Movie Pass. So, hey, you know.
That helps too.
So now on to that which you can see on the video service format platform of your choice. Up first, a highly anticipated, never thought it was going to happen sequel to a eventually classic 1982 film starring Harrison Ford. Here we have Ryan Gosling stepping into the long trench coat and sour dour looks of what once was Harrison Ford in Blade Runner 2049.
The original, one of my favorite movies of all time. I think it's one of the 10 greatest movies of all time. Ooh. I really do. I think it's brilliant. It has huge universal themes. And obviously is renowned for its visual stylistic look and everything like that. All of that is certainly back. Wow. It's like they stepped right out of the 1982 version and started making 2049. If you like that look, it's all there. It's just gorgeous and beautiful. Gosling is good. I don't want to give away a whole lot about his background or anything like that. But he's kind of stoic. I didn't get, I wasn't crazy about this. I liked it well enough, but on the heels of what I consider to be one of the greatest movies ever made, I thought it really fell kind of short. Visually, it's beautiful. It's interesting the way Ford comes in. He's not in it a lot. But I thought they had, particularly when my understanding was Ford never wanted to do a sequel, but he read the script and said it was the greatest script he'd ever read in his life. And so I was expecting a lot. It didn't give it to me.
I am not a major fan of the original. It's one of those movies that I've seen a few times, but maybe I didn't see it the right way or I saw it too late or whatever, but it's never connected with me in a big way. So going to see this, I was saying off air, if there was anything that carried over thematically or plot-wise or reference-wise between the two films, I didn't get it.
It wasn't a lot. Yeah.
I have a basic memory of what the first film was. But the visuals are so good and the music is really good. So based on just visuals and sound alone, it was an entertaining ride. But ultimately, when it was over, I felt like, was this really necessary? I mean, that's why it was necessary. I'm not sure it really does much in the way of advancing that story or that it needed to be made. But for people who love the original or are curious or want to get into that weird space again, it's there for them. But again, this is one I probably won't bother watching again.
Fair enough.
This isn't something I'll watch over and over and over again.
Strangely enough, there are things that can happen over and over and over again. And I don't know where this came from, actually. It kind of slid in under the radar elsewhere. But possibly my favorite movie of last year is about a young girl who keeps getting killed at night. She, in her dreams, she sees her killer and she's murdered at night, but then she wakes up and she has to relive the whole day. It's Groundhog Day, only with an evil twist. And it's not just Groundhog Day, it's going to be your Happy Death Day. So very silly, but I thought the two lead actors were just terrific. The writers take this silly, hackneyed, we've seen it a zillion times concept, and I just love the way this twisted around. You see character arc and everything like that. I fell in love with Happy Death Day
and I feel
bought it.
This was really good. This is what I've been thinking about renting on Amazon. This is the kind of thing where all these little seeds that are planted, from the first day, amplify and play out in different ways. It's you don't. Well, I actually did guess who it was midway through the movie, but it's not obvious. It's very, very funny at times. It's very gory at times. It's everything you want in a fun horror movie, horror comedy. But initially when I heard it, I was like, it's just Groundhog Day with murder. Yeah, but it's really cool, and I liked it. And I would highly recommend Happy Death Day to anybody who likes this sort of thing.
Yeah.
So, speaking of people who like this sort of thing,
yes,
I like the next couple sort of things, not to give anything away.
We're jumping ahead.
We're jumping way ahead.
You'll see some stuff next week.
See, because now I can say this. So the deal is, we have all this stuff, and we put these specialty titles at the end of the show, and those are the ones I actually like the most and want to talk about, and they always get short-shrift, so I should keep talking so I can't have time to talk about them. So, first up, we have a new Blu-ray restoration and release of an old movie from, I believe, I want to say 1940, could be off by a year or three. Victor Mature stars as a caveman and with some giant photographed lizards with fins on their backs and rivers of lava and mud on a small soundstage in 1 million BC.
There is dialogue.
There is. That was the VCI restoration trailer because there are other copies of the original trailer.
You get
online,
a chance to see how great it looks.
Good this looks.
Wow.
Okay, so most people would find this pretty silly.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say it's not silly. It was probably always silly. But what impressed me, so it opens up with a framing device. And okay, here's the beef with this movie. They never get back to it. So like these explorers take shelter in a cave somewhere and they meet this old guy who's like an archaeologist or a dinosaurologist or a cryptozoologist or something like that. Thank you. And he starts telling them the story of this area and the tribes and the creatures that inhabited it. And then we go into the story of the film. But then when the story of the film is over, it just says the end.
Right.
I'm like, what about the guy in the cave? Did they make it out alive?
Yeah.
Sequel. So you have Victor Mature as this, I don't even remember the character names. It's very interesting. So it's cavemen, it's stereotypical Hollywood 40s cavemen. And the real star of this film, produced by Hal Roach, by the way, who brought us Laurel and Hardy and the Little Rascals, is the special effects. They have these miniature sets of rivers and landscapes and jungles and earthquakes and volcanoes that are really well done. You have to keep in mind when it was done.
Right.
And then all of the dinosaurs are, of course, like iguanas with fins taped on their backs and stuff. And the footage was apparently so successful and impressive in its day of all these creatures fighting each other that it would get reused in movies.
You've seen it all over,
As long as black and white movies with dinosaur scenes were being made, somebody was like, hey Hal, here's 50. I want to use that footage of the iguanas biting their faces off again. So I really enjoyed it. You know, this is the kind of thing I would watch as a matinee on TV as a kid. So it's not for all audiences, but if you're a film scholar or you like special effects or dinosaur movies and you're willing to accept that movies were different 70 years ago, I think it's a really good release. The VCI disc, I believe, has a very interesting commentary, if I'm thinking of the right disc. It was a while ago that I watched this. And I quite enjoyed it. So it's definitely worth picking up if you are so inclined. Now, my God, we have time to say it without breathlessly doing so.
You can take a breath, if you like.
It's the Arrow Video Corner.
It is. Watch out. It's always me.
Okay, wait.
Me.
Oh, there he is, right in the watch pocket. We have two interesting, kind of classy releases today. First up is a French film from the 50s about a female doctor who comes into a small seaside village to take over the practice of the former elderly male doctor, and she meets some resistance with the townspeople, and ultimately you will find out what does it take to get the love of a woman.
Quelle dépense de cette film?
Huh? So it's French. This is what I love about Arrow, among many other things. It's not just movies like Evil Ed
Right.
or Frankenhooker. It's also like classy stuff. It's I can't recall if this was Arrow Academy versus Arrow. Arrow Academy tends to be the very classy and the newer and the indie and the documentary and stuff. But at any rate, it's a French film I'd never heard of before.
Right.
I cannot recall offhand because it's a while ago that I watched it. If this film has any pedigree, like if anybody who worked on this went on to do things that are more well known. For all I know, it's from the greatest French director who ever lived. I just don't remember. So as I said, the tale is this woman comes into this town, and it's got some interesting things going on. One, it's some people are resistant to deal with a doctor who's not the doctor they've had for all these years. Some people are hesitant to listen to a woman about anything in this, male-dominated little town, which I think there's a mine there. There's some big industry that's there, and a lot of the hard-working tough guys, like the scene that you just saw, they didn't really want to have anything to do with her, or they would make these calls for her to come up and show up because there was an injury, and they were just messing with her just to keep her on her toes and stuff like that. And eventually she meets a guy who's working with this industry, and there's a romance. But he wants her to quit her job and be the wife, as was often the case in those era. And she feels a duty to this. She's like, this is what I've worked for all my life. I'm the doctor of this town. I'm a person of prominence. I'm not going to give all that up so I can be the missus.
Okay.
So there's a back and forth struggle that's really interesting dramatically with that, because at some point she feels like, well, screw this town and all these people. What have they done for me lately? It is gorgeously shot. It is a seaside French village, which I believe there's a lighthouse there too. And you get these well-shot night scenes and some really pretty locations. It's a mix of studio set, soundstage, and location. But I mean, the visuals alone, and it's not like painterly visuals. It was just nicely Craftsman studio type black and white photography that was really nice. And it's a pretty pleasant overall. I mean, it's what would be considered a women's melodrama, so it's going to be pretty miserable half the time for some of the characters, but I really quite liked this. I don't know if this is the kind of thing that I would say rush out and buy, but if you're a fan of retro foreign cinema, or if you look up this on the IMDb and see a name you recognize and have never seen it, it's certainly worth a shot. Probably the fans of Evil Ed won't really care about it too much. Speaking of foreign films...
And we even have a Blade Runner connection here, don't we?
Do we now?
Yes.
We do. The star of this film, sorry, it's all me. Sorry, folks, sincerely, sorry, it's all me. We have Rutger Hauer, star of The Hitcher, star of Blind Fury, star of Wanted Dead or Alive, star of that Harrison Ford movie about the robots.
That about those guys?
I can't remember. Maybe they'll make a sequel someday. He stars as a man who's down on his luck through an act of benevolence, gets a hand up, and his life takes a whole different turn in The Legend of the Holy Drinker. Hi.
Rutger was a little more flamboyant with his language.
He was.
In a lot of it.
We were both watching that clip like this.
Don't say it, don't say it.
I was going to have to cut out after we stopped recording. So this is a film I'd never heard of until it showed up on my doorstep. And boy, I thought it was really good.
Okay.
So Rutger Hauer is, living under a bridge by the seaside, not by the seaside, by the canal. And this well-dressed man says, I can see you're down on your luck. I'm going to give you, how much money do you need to survive or something? And at any rate, he gives him $200 with a stipulation that, when the time is right, pay this money. You can pay this money back to St. Teresa in this church, which is a statue of a little girl. And that act of benevolence sets off a chain reaction of events that keep making his life better and better.
Okay.
But the problem is he's an alcoholic, and he keeps continually, when he gets a little bit of extra money, using it for drink and going back down under again. So it's the struggle of, will he stay on the noble path, or will he let his addiction take him under? And it's pretty whimsical at times. Like, you really feel for this decent guy who's in bad circumstances, and when he gets these little advantages, you're like, oh man, that's great. And these little vignettes of the people and places that he engages with in his not swing upward, but his crawl upward are very interesting. It's really nicely shot. You get a really nice sense of the European location where it was done. And there's happiness and there's sadness, and part of it is this guy reflecting upon his life at what may or may not be the end of it. It's a really good acting job for Rutger Hauer, and everybody thinks of Rutger Hauer as this action guy from all those other movies I mentioned. But he had a decent career in Europe in these art films and dramas before he started being in cheesy American movies. So it's very, very interesting to see if you're a Rutger Hauer fan, because most Rutger Hauer fans who know his mainstream work,
I had certainly never heard of this.
Probably have no idea about his dramatic stuff. So I thought it was really interesting. I liked Legend of the Holy Drinker.
Okay, good.
And we managed to get through all of, what we're going to tell
you about
some stuff.
Today. You'll see some Academy Award. In fact, the Academy Awards are
tomorrow morning?
Announced tomorrow. So you'll probably see some catch up on a little of that. Battle of the Sexes we'll take a look at. I'm hoping nods for each of those. I don't know about, I like, we won't review it. We'll get back.
It'll be next week.
Yes. So until then, who are you?
Oh, hi, I'm Mark.
And I'm Tom.
And we are
the Cinemaniacs.
I love stories.